Yeah, today's a bad day. This week's been bad. But this is the fact. Yeah, they're just.
Mario's optimism is fading. So you know the situation's bad. He's been saying the war is over for months, and now he's finally getting to the point of realizing that maybe the war isn't over.
Not agreeing on Hormuz while other countries are getting involved. Did you see the ship that was struck in Egypt? An American ship about an hour ago by a drone?
No, I haven't seen that yet. I was on another podcast. You miss so much when you take an hour off.
It's wild. Who would have expected a ship to be struck in Egypt now? Yeah, it's an American ship. It was struck in Damietta port. See what that is. Can you show Stephanie where Damietta port is? I'm curious. And that adds on to the whole Ukraine saga that we saw in the last few days. Ukraine striking the Iranian ship, and the New York Times report came out that the Iranians were preparing to fire a missile at the Ukrainian port before the Ukrainian foreign minister called the Iranian foreign minister. The Lloyd's, the insurance company, has stopped insuring ships going through the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, I think, if I'm not mistaken. The Saudi-linked ones, and that's where the port is, just out of the Suez Canal.
Do we know what kind of ship that was?
LNG ship.
Oh, no. Really?
Yeah.
Looking into that American ship. From the targeted American ship in Egypt.
Yeah, the fire has been put out, thankfully. But the Egyptians are saying it was just an accident. But the security company, right after the strike, they said it was a drone. So I'm going to go with the security company before the politicians going to start creating a narrative. So yeah, Egyptians. But out of nowhere, it's so that's what the officials are saying. But you'd expect officials to kind of downplay this. That's no.
That was a lot of water pressure, wasn't it? So that was after the fire's been put out, and they're still spraying water to make sure it doesn't restart.
Only what countries would do to avoid fear or escalation. But the security company, Ambre, the maritime security firm, said it was a drone. So I'd lean with that one. If I had to make a guess. But what do you think of this? There's so much going there from the Houthis and the Saudis fighting, the Saudis and the Iraqi groups that are aligned with Iran fighting, and the Americans joining them, with the Iranians attacking the US yesterday in Jordan, not the Gulf, but Jordan. Important distinction there, because the more they move away from the Gulf, they're trying to move the Gulf to the Iranian side. So they strike Jordan instead. A surprise attack. We don't know why. The Iranians haven't given a reason for it. Trump waking up this morning saying he's going to fucking destroy. I think he used the words. What do you say? We're going to beat the effing shit out of them. If they F up, the effing Fs. We're going to be effing the shit out of them. We'll be hitting them hard. They're going to be beating. They're going to get a beating, and it says that a few different times in different ways.
Yeah, so I'm surprised it hasn't already happened, but the United States will be striking Iran.
Yeah, and the Omanis gave the Iranians a new proposal that allowed joint management of the Strait of Hormuz with an optional fee, something similar to the Straits of Malacca, which the Americans did not even okay. And the Iranians said no, and the Iranians, what they want is...
An optional fee is not a fee at all. If it's optional, no one was going to pay it.
They want a full control of everything inbound and 50-50 control with the Omanis on everything outbound. That's the Iranian position from the reports we got today. Oil prices are not doing well either, so the floor is yours, Mr. Martinson.
So this actually fits in the paradigm, excuse me, you and I talked about a while ago, which is that if you wanted the strait to be open, you would be doing things differently than are being done, right? So I trust actions, not words. And so apparently the Trump administration is not serious about opening the strait. In fact, they may be more seriously dedicated to keeping it closed. That's how it appears, right? Because...
No, yeah, I don't think it's a dedication to keep it closed. I think Trump honestly wants it open. He just doesn't want to deal with Iran. He doesn't want to give Iran anything in terms of sanction relief, unfrozen assets. So, yeah. He hasn't really come to grips that he's lost this war.
As I mentioned a long time ago, the fact that we sent Kushner and Witkoff as our negotiating team told me that we weren't serious about it. It's very insulting, right? To send the two people in who were negotiating.
I think Trump wanted to insult the Iranians.
During the time right before the decapitation strike, and you send them right back in afterwards. It's nobody misses the symbolism of that, right? So we weren't serious about it then, and I still don't think we're serious about it now. But now, what do we know? We know that Trump is starting to we're getting these little leaks that maybe he's a little frustrated with the whole thing, which he should be, but he's starting to have to square up to the idea that he's going to have to take an L on the way out here.
Exactly. He's starting to square up, but he's not anywhere ready to accept that L yet. we need the oil shortage for that to happen.
Question is how big of an L, you know? And because
A very big L, huge L. Because after the oil crisis hit, Americans are going to be suffering under the impact of the oil crisis. Iran's going to end up with the Strait of Hormuz. There won't be regime change. They'll probably get a nuke. American bases in the region destroyed. U.S. presence forced out. It's just going to be one massive L for the United States, and specifically for Trump, who decided to start this idiotic war.
it's clear we can't force the straits open, not in time, not before we get to the suction line at tank bottoms. You know, this is coming. And with that, we're,
Tank bottoms, that's what we're waiting for.
Iran, they said, look, the story I heard could be totally wrong, is that they said, hey, we're going to have to attack now from time to time in order offensively in a defensive posture. So the scuttlebutt was that the U.S., maybe U.S. and Israel, were staging for another attack, and they were staging in Jordan, right? Because that's where we've had to push all of our staging areas to. And so they decided to strike that. CENTCOM came out and said, oh, we stopped 100% of the inbound missiles. Don't worry about it. You and I.
That's a lie.
Probably not true. And I think you retweeted it as well. We found out that where the Pentagon said, 6 deaths, a handful of casualties. In fact, it was more than 200 casualties in the first week, we know now. That chart you put up went up through about April. We don't know what May and June and July look like yet, but pretty strong chance that Iran has been causing a lot more damage than we've admitted to. So it's just kind of a really weird thing, isn't it? So here politically in the U.S., if you want to have a conversation about this stuff, if you want to...
A lot more damage than Asmongold is aware of. Also, Asmongold is good in one sense, is that he represents the average American, that their information about the war and mostly believing the mainstream media.
Want to talk about what's happening, you have to have some sense of what's actually happening over there. Like, what are we losing? How many lives are at risk? Like, what are we trying to gain? Like what are our options? And there's none of that, right? We're getting lies. We're getting half-truths. We're getting just misstatements. And so I have a strong sense that this is going to do what wars always do. It's going to grow out of control. And with the addition of those, the Iranian-backed Iraqi troop, movements, whatever you call those groups, with those getting struck, with deaths and injuries there from Saudi and U.S. airstrikes, with the Houthis getting involved, this is spreading, okay? This is what these things tend to do. And we don't have any clear sense of where we're going, how we're going to get out of it. But I can tell you this, we are steaming dead ahead towards tank bottom. And from an energy standpoint, we don't have months, right? Bloomberg just put out an article saying, people in the world are starting to come to grips that maybe the strait won't be open right away.
Yep.
Could take months. We don't have many more months in this story before things get really, really bad economically, financially, possibly even with respect to food production. If it carries through and disrupts next year's fertilizer production, this is what's at stake now. And I don't have a sense of anybody really being in control anymore.
So the reason I've been optimistic is because, and the audience knows this, the low interceptors, high energy prices, and depleted stockpiles, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But what if it's not enough? What if Iran controlling the Strait of Hormuz is so damaging to U.S. hegemony, and the U.S. is not, Iran is not budging from full control? What if the low energy...
For now, that's the dynamic. It's too humiliating for Trump to allow Iran to control the Strait of Hormuz. That dynamic will change once there's an oil shortage. But for now, the war cannot end now.
reserves, the petroleum reserves, the high energy prices, and the munition the interceptors depleting are not sufficient to just convince Trump to walk away. And maybe explain also your thoughts on it, but also what would that scenario look like, especially on the energy front? What would be ways, if you were advising Trump, he's like, look, under no circumstances can they control the Strait of Hormuz, so we have to continue this for as long as it takes.
Right.
What would you advise him on how to deal with it?
Well, I'd get a time machine and not attack.
Exactly what I've been saying for months now. Even if I was Trump, there's nothing I could do to fix this. The only thing you could do to fix this is not bomb Iran's supreme leader.
But now that we're here, so there's a couple of competing issues here. First off, you've heard Trump say a lot of things like, "Oh, we don't need the strait," and Pete Hegseth said, "We don't need the strait," and all these, Chris Wright says, "We don't need the strait because we have oil and gas over here. We've got Venezuela. If we have to, I guess we have Canada. See where that goes, right?" So that if you combine the known reserves of Canada, the United States, and Venezuela right now, you have about 30% of known world reserves. And by the way, Venezuela is very problematic to turn those reserves into actual flowing.
Yeah, Venezuela, that's not fair calling it 30% of the world's reserves because, yes, it has huge reserves, but they're completely untapped. They're producing like 1.2 million barrels of oil a day, and there's no chance of that going up anytime in the near term. So, huge reserve, tiny production. It's not a huge producer on the world stage.
Oil for a lot of technical reasons, but it's going to take years, if not decades, and hundreds of billions of dollars to get that stuff flowing. Meanwhile, you have the entire Middle East has 50% of world's known reserves. You put Russia on top of that, you're at about 60%. And that's really the grand prize. So who controls that oil has always been a thing. Listen, if you want to see where a war is about to happen, look where a gas pipeline or an oil pipeline goes in. It's just like clockwork. Within a couple of years, if we don't control it in the United States, it gets bombed, things happen, right? So that's been the game ever since Carter. It's obviously energy is the master resource. It's the grand prize. And that's always been true. Nothing's changed about that. AI doesn't change that. Nothing changes that. So the question is then who actually has control of that? And so this whole idea that Iran, who cares if they charge $1 per barrel on outbound oil, right? Annoying, but surely we'll survive when it's like 1% of the price of oil or 1.5%. No big deal. The problem is that Iran can then set conditions. Could be 2-3 years down. They've controlled it. They said, hey, you have to pay us $1 a barrel. Now they're...
No, yeah, the conditions. If you have the deep state in the United States that wants to effect regime change in Iran, letting them control the straits means that the United States can never bomb Iran again, basically. It's now off limits because they control the Strait of Hormuz, and everyone knows that. They can shut off the world's oil, and the world would have seen what happens when the world's oil is shut off. So that's why the deep state can't allow Iran to control the Strait of Hormuz. It will make regime change in Iran 10 times harder. It will all have to be done covertly, like in Syria, like only through funding terrorist proxies and somehow trying to destabilize Iran from within will be the only option for regime change in Iran. And Iran is a much stronger country than Syria. It's unlikely to work.
They're going to say, actually, you have to pay us 150 yuan per barrel. And by the way, we'll only allow it through if you're going to price that and sell that oil in yuan. You can change that back into dollars if you want, but they could easily start to enforce conditions around how that flows. So now we're down to the petrodollar. 1973, Henry...
Also, one reason ships didn't want to pay the fee to Iran is they were afraid of U.S. sanctions. So the United States would have to lift sanctions on Iran or carve out an exception from the sanctions to allow ships to pay the toll. Otherwise, even if Iran-controlled straits, most ships wouldn't use it because they're afraid to pay the toll. And Trump doesn't want to lift sanctions or give that exception.
Henry Kissinger, I think he was kind of an evil man, but also an evil genius. And he set up this thing called the petrodollar back in 1973. And this is significant, Mario, because it was August 15th, 1971, when the United States had to totally abandon the Bretton Woods project, which was the enshrinement of the U.S. dollar as the world's reserve currency in 1944. It lasted for a while, but...
And backed by gold. That was the key part. It was actually gold that was reserve currency, the foundation. And dollar was supposed to be redeemable in gold. And in 1971, they abandoned that.
But then we spent a little too much, had the Vietnam War. And so France notably started taking its gold back, and Nixon had to temporarily slam the gold window on that day in 71. Well, by 73, things were pretty desperate. What is the dollar going to be backed by next? It's not gold anymore. What is it? So it actually got backed by oil through this thing called the petrodollar. And what was the arrangement? The arrangement was principally with the Saudis, but it extended elsewhere. And we said to the Saudis, listen, we'll help protect you. We'll use our big military. But when you sell oil, one, you're going to sell it in dollars. And two, you're going to keep those dollars here in the United States. You'll buy treasuries, you'll buy stocks. This will work for everybody. So in effect, what we were doing, that the dollar was backed by oil. And all through all of history, that's been true up until just recently, when we've seen our first yuan-denominated oil transactions happening. So that was the petrodollar. So that allowed the United States to continue to export huge amounts of dollars, treasuries, and all that. Only thing here's a fun fact, they didn't actually leave the country. So since the Iraq War, the United States, all of Iraq's oil revenues are actually held in the United States. And they beg us for some of that if they have this project and they have to tell us what they want to spend the money on, and we release it, right? Same thing with Venezuela, went down there, captured Maduro and his wife. Ever since then, about $13 billion of Venezuelan oil has been sold, but all that money went into a U.S. account. And by the way, nobody can quite account for where it is, and it's a bit of a mystery what happened to it. It seems to potentially have disappeared, but we're not sure yet.
Oh, yeah, that's funny. So same situation with Iraq still, to this day. When they sell oil, the money goes into basically the Fed, the Treasury in the United States, and we decide if we give it back to the Iraqis. We chose their prime minister this way. We said, we don't like that one, we don't like that one. Okay, make that guy the prime minister. Very democratic, right, for Iraq?
That's been the game for a long time. What's at risk, Mario, is if that petrodollar system that's been in place in 73 starts to get diminished or even fully unwound, now what's the dollar backed by? The military? Well, we've just been shown that it's not as powerful as we thought. That's a huge reputational and also geopolitically consequential sort of a finding.
Because the petrodollar exists because of the American protection. As you said, what we said to Saudi, or the US said to Saudi, is that, hey, you use the dollar, keep it in our place, but we'll make sure that you are secure. We'll offer you military security. We'll ensure the Strait of Hormuz is open. You don't have to worry about that side of things.
And in this war, Saudi became unsafe because of the United States. Because the United States chose to attack Iran. It was safe before this war. Then the United States made Saudi Arabia unsafe.
So the petrodollar is dependent on security, isn't it?
Absolutely, 100%. That's the other side of the coin. That's the implicit guarantee. Without that guarantee, explicit or implicit, it doesn't work anymore. And that's what's actually unwinding. I think it's already a done deal because we just found out that there is no realistic defense against missiles and drones at this point that model into how the United States conducted warfare, which is we have bigger ships, we got more jets, and we can just pound you into oblivion. But we found out early on, I think it was only like the first week of March, like all of our air carrier group assets were at least 5, 6, 7, 800 kilometers offshore because we couldn't get any closer because of the missile threats. And so I don't think we can project power like we used to. And the problem is the United States has to
absolutely
fly or sail.
Also, bases. What Iran has done is it's taken out U.S. bases near their country. And that's one of our ways of projecting power with aircraft carriers, yes, but also we'd put bases near potential threats and we'd use those bases to just bomb the hell out of them and eliminate the threats. Now, Iran has just rendered these bases inoperable. It's destroyed all the infrastructure. And with drones. So it's not just the aircraft carriers that have to stay far away. Now, the bases that we use, United States, is all the way here in Jordan. And that's getting destroyed, and after that, it'll be all the way here in Israel. It's a changing world.
To get over to the region, China can walk. Russia can walk. It's a very, very different equation. So that's all changing really rapidly. And I think that's, we've heard Scott Bessent mention this at least twice now so far. Oh, the dollar is going to be back. Venezuela selling for dollars. But even if we sold all of Canada and Venezuela, assuming we steal both of those, and we put those in dollars, it's still about 30% of world's reserves, and it's actually closer to maybe 20% of world actual oil production. If 80% gets to go offline and settle in other currencies, there's no need for all those countries out there to hold probably over $10, $15 trillion of dollars in reserves so they can conduct oil trade. Then what do they do with those dollars? Well, increasingly, we've seen what they've done, right? This year, for the first time, gold is now a more significant asset on central bank balance sheets than U.S. treasuries. And so that's the process they've been trying to stop. And
exactly.
I don't think they were thinking that through when they first attacked Iran, but now that it's on the table, it's pretty existential for world hegemony, power, control, prestige, reputation.
Well, there's my exact worry. If the Iranians are not willing to compromise, and this is what I learned this week, is that in the last 48 hours especially, is that the Iranians are not willing to compromise. And Trump confirmed what many would consider kind of expected.
Why would they compromise when they won the war?
He cannot abandon the Strait of Hormuz because of the explanation you've just provided. So if the Iranians don't concede, what would be an acceptable solution in your view for the Americans that would still not unravel the U.S. hegemony, quickly unravel it? Because you're saying it's
nothing. United States law. That's why I said that even if I was Trump, there's nothing I could do. Everything's bad from the United States.
Inevitable anyway. It already started, but that won't cause too much damage. So let's say on one extreme is Iran fully controlling the Strait of Hormuz and Trump walks away with the tail between his legs. The other extreme is Iran just gives up on their objective of controlling the Strait of Hormuz because the U.S. offered them enough sanctions, enough carrots. Is there a scenario?
No, because the United States can just change its mind a year later and put those sanctions back in place. There's no guarantee whatsoever. So whereas control of the Strait of Hormuz, that's something permanent, a permanent leverage that Iran has over the world. There's nothing that U.S. can offer that's comparable.
So where they could meet in the middle that wouldn't harm the U.S. too much, where Trump could accept it. Because based on the comments on that Omani proposal that Trump didn't even accept, and based on all the reporting that Trump would accept nothing short of, freedom of navigation as it was before. Now, he did float the idea of sharing a fee, which is bizarre. Could that be a solution? But the Iranians are not open to that whatsoever. They don't even want to share with the Gulf. They're only talking about Oman, which surprised me. I thought they'd be fine sharing with the Gulf, the fee. So then what options do we have beyond these two extremes? What's in the middle?
Nothing.
Well, I suppose the only thing that I could imagine off the top of my head would be that we release all the frozen money. We tell Iran, hey, all right, we're in. Okay, you get to charge, but we'll back up, but you have to continue to charge in dollars. Okay, oil comes out in dollars, and you charge fees in dollars, and that's it. That's our, as long as you continue to do that, who cares, right? I think that would be what they'd have to do. But, if we think about it, they keep saying the stuff like, oh, for 47 years, since the revolution that, where they captured the U.S. consulate, 47 years, Iran's just been this huge thorn in the side of American and Israeli interests in the region. But actually, we have to go back to 1953 when the CIA overthrew Mossadegh, the democratically elected person in leader of Iran, and we installed the Shah. And the Shah ran a very nasty bit of business.
Brutal regime.
Right? The Savak were pretty terrible to their own people, their secret police. And then that finally got overthrown, and now we have this Islamic Republic instead of a democratically elected thing. That's what we did. So from their perspective, Mario,
they had democracy before we intervened. we, the United States, are the one that fucked over Iran.
Dealing with the United States being duplicitous, unpleasant, hostile for a very, very, very long time. So the idea that they're suddenly going to be open to negotiations when they actually have the strategic leverage, it's not going to fly. So we're going to have to, we, the United States, are going to have to cough up things that we wouldn't want to. And I don't see a solution here where the United States gets to basically, say, well, we got what we needed out of that. I don't see that option anymore.
What do you think? I haven't asked you that question before. What do you think will happen next with the latest developments now?
I think wars grow out of control. I don't think this one's quite done burning itself out yet, because now all of a sudden, you're starting to get the first rumblings of that ancient blood feud, the Shias versus the Sunnis, right? And if that lid comes off, then now we're talking Balkans, right? Where, everybody got along peacefully for a long time, and then suddenly it was Christians and Muslims, and that flared up after being tamped down for 50, 60 years, and all of a sudden came right back like it never went away at all. So we could see that resume again. And I don't think there's any way that Israel is going to allow us or permit us to back away from this thing at this point in time. They're too close to getting what they want out of this whole thing. And I don't see any way out of it.
Yes. And for the moment, Israel is going to prevent Trump from backing out. Once the oil crisis starts, the dynamics of power in Washington will change. And compared to the leverage of people that want the Straits open, the power of the neocons, Zionists, their leverage in Washington won't be as great.
But this besides more conflict at this stage.
Do you share the worry that some have of potentially this merging with the Ukraine war? We saw that Iran was about to fire ballistic.
No, they're separate conflicts. It might merge in small ways, but all the players are different. That's really Europe, Ukraine against Russia, and Middle East is the Gulf states and Israel against Iran. They're different, and the United States now is stepped back even further from the Ukraine conflict in that we're not giving direct aid. So, yeah, that's the whole reason this Iran war started, is because Trump didn't give a shit about Ukraine, because this Iran war is very bad for Ukraine.
Missile on Ukraine, according to New York Times, before the Ukrainians apologized for the strike on the ship. Do you worry about that possibility?
A little bit, not as much. I mean, so if for that to really sort of take root, it would have to be up in the Caspian Sea, which it could. But otherwise, they're kind of separated by a bit of a distance. The only way it starts to really get merged is if Russia starts openly supplying weaponry and intel to Iran, which they could, I think, under fair use, because we've done the same too.
Well, I don't know about weaponry, but intel, I think Russia is already openly providing Iran with intel.
The Ukrainians. So they might, if they do that, then I could see this suddenly becoming a multi-front war. But here's the thing. By closing down the Bab el-Mandeb Strait and Hormuz Strait at this point in time, we're now out 15, 16 million barrels a day. There's only so long that can go on. And almost all of those, Mario, went into the Pacific Basin, right? They went to India, they went to Pakistan, they went to China, Japan, right? So that's where those oil shipments are going. All of those are the most affected countries at this point in time. And sooner or later, that becomes a real problem for them. The reserves just go down too low. I know China had magically and very prophetically stored a lot of oil, but even that has its limits. So if this looks like it goes to the next stage, and this is the thing, again, I've said it before, but if, Rand said, look, if you cross certain thresholds, here's what we'll do. And they talked about actually hitting the energy infrastructure of the other Gulf states that are involved in supporting the U.S. If they did that, right? And I was shocked 3 days ago when the Alab Kike refinery got hit. And that processes, that one refinery, about 7% of the world's petrochemicals and conditioned oil. It's a huge thing. So but it was just kind of pinprick stuff. I think it's pretty easily fixable. But if Iran said that does it and they drop 50 missiles on that thing and really destroy it, that's an economic catastrophe for the world that I don't see how that doesn't spiral into however you draw the lines. East versus west is kind of what it looks like.
Wow. If Iran strikes that big refinery in Saudi, it'll be that bad?
Mm-hmm. It's
Why are we playing with fire then? That's crazy.
Isn't it?
because the Houthis have already closed up. There's one refinery in Saudi, you probably know which one, has already ceased operations till next month or for a couple of weeks. The one that the Houthis struck.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's one of the bigger ones, isn't it? Yeah, not the biggest, but one of the big ones.
And that one also made specialty oils. So there's two things that got hit really hard. Now that specialty oils, like you need these different lubricants, like, hydraulic fluid. And it's like their specialty oils are a thing. And not every refinery makes them, but two very important ones are now offline. So the Jiangsu made a lot. And also, but the biggest one was the Pearl facility, which turned natural gas into gas to liquids plant in Qatar. That got shut down. We're going to get into lubricant difficulties here worldwide before too much longer too. And this we haven't, Mary, we haven't.
Lubricant shortage. Watch out for the lubricant shortage.
Touched on the missing sulfur, the missing helium, et cetera, et cetera. So this really has to get resolved soon. And Trump has said, I wouldn't want to be the next Herbert Hoover. Like, no danger of that, buddy. You're going to make Herbert Hoover. Like,
well, you do need lubricant. Like, that's motor oil, by the way. It's you need it for a whole bunch of things.
Be a completely reconditioned president because Trump will be responsible for Herbert Hoovering the entire world if he continues down this path. So I don't see good options here.
People don't really understand how big those attacks on the Saudi energy infrastructure are for the rest of the world. If the Houthis cause that much damage, and the Iraqi militias as well, the Iraqi groups, cause that much damage.
Yeah, and it seems there's really no way to protect against that. But the fact that the Houthis, I think the total GDP of Yemen is about 20 billion a year, and the Houthis are just a part of that. So, we have we're going to spend $1 trillion on defense, and we couldn't defend against basically one of the smallest countries you could ever think to pick on.
Yeah, that's the changing dynamics of the world.
It just proves that there's not a lot that we can do effectively here to protect these things. These plants are unprotectable. They're big, they're giant, they're sprawling. You might have some air interceptors around them. They'll be reasonably effective against a few things, but if you just swarm the drones in, some are going to get through. And it doesn't take more than one in a critical spot to do a lot of damage.
And there's also the Iraqi groups that were able to cause damage to the Saudi oil refinery. So there's both. And the Iraqi groups are even smaller in terms of the amount of money they have and military capacity they have to the Houthis. And they were able to cause significant damage to the Saudi oil refinery that they struck. And again, we're talking about the Iraqi groups and the Houthis.
Iraqi groups are actually quite formidable. I think they're stronger than Hezbollah.
If Iran gets involved directly, if this escalates, as you've said, that will be an economic catastrophe. If we, before we go, and the Houthis want to charge a fee at the Bab el-Mandeb Strait as well, just in case this wasn't messy enough, there is that.
Okay, that's just great. Thank you, Trump. Not just one waterway is going to be closed because of you. Now there's going to be 2 waterways closed. You can have this closed up here, this closed down here, and fees in both of them when they reopen.
How bad would it get for the global economy if this does spiral out of control? When I say spiral, there's no more red lines other than nukes. I'm talking about, kind of Ukraine-Russia type spiraling. There's certain red lines still there, but to that level where they...
Okay, no, then it gets really bad because Ukraine has been trying to hit Russian refineries and their drone capacity is less than Ukraine. And Russia's air defense is against drones probably the best in the world right now because they've been dealing with it non-stop from Ukraine. And they are a superpower that's devoting huge resources to fighting drones. And they've mostly shut down the attacks on refineries. That's why Ukraine started going after warehouses. However, Iran has tens of thousands, 20,000, 30,000 small Shahed drones. It can just launch them endlessly until every bit of oil infrastructure in the Gulf is destroyed. There's no way to save any of it if there's no more red lines. And the entire world is fucked. On the plus side for the United States, if there's no more oil infrastructure, it doesn't matter who controls the Hormuz Straits.
They'll try to strike, the Iranians will try to strike any infrastructure, energy infrastructure they can in the Gulf. The Americans are striking any infrastructure they can in Iran. The Bab el-Mandeb, the Strait of Hormuz are full war zones. How bad is that scenario? Because I think it's a scenario now worth seriously considering.
So first off, we're going to take the former 2025 average daily flow out of the Gulf region was 21 million barrels a day. That was both crude and products. But products are made from crude. So it's effectively 21 million barrels a day of crude going offline. That brings us back from 86 down to 61. Yeah, we'd be looking at about a 45% reduction in the global economy over the next year, if that happened.
A 45% reduction in the global economy. Yay. That is 3 times worse than the Great Depression.
And as well, it looks like...
How does that compare to the Great Depression?
It'd be 2x. Great Depression was
Oh, I would say 3, but 2x is okay.
20 to 25%, depending on the country we're talking about.
Okay. Then, okay, 2 times.
But the Great Depression, again, was caused because we mucked up our financial system. It wasn't because we didn't have resources and people didn't want to work and, all that. Like, we just couldn't quite get the finances working back again because we just broke the financial system. But that's fundamentally a human construct. I'm talking, Mario, about missing molecules. It's not a matter of willpower. It's not a matter of narrative shaping. It doesn't matter how plucky we get and all that. It's just like, if you don't have the energy, you can't perform those economic tasks, and they don't happen. And so that's part one. The reason this is going to be like even messier than the Great Depression, of course, besides the fact that this is going to be global, and the Great Depression was pretty great, but not for the whole globe.
By the way, he's talking about a scenario where the oil infrastructure actually gets destroyed in the Gulf. I don't think that will happen. If it does happen, the dollar's finished. That type of global recession, the United States is too fragile to survive something twice as bad as the Great Depression. That's why I think the deep state will do everything it can to prevent that from happening. And China is doing everything it can to prevent that from happening. I think all the powers that be are doing everything they can to prevent that worst case scenario, because the dollar goes down if that happens.
Oh, it was really the West, principally. This time we're talking about an absolute retraction in a global economy now where no one nation is actually self-sufficient for anything anymore, pretty much, right? We're all dependent on coordinated, interconnected, just-in-time, never-ending trade that has
except for Russia
to function smoothly and well. So if that starts to break down, there's things that we're going to be missing. And we live in such a complex, complicated world now, kind of like that poem that says, for want of a nail, the shoe was lost. For want of the shoe, the horse was lost. For want of the horse, the message was lost. For want of the message, the battle was lost. For want of the battle, the kingdom was lost, right? Like a nail, That's the kind of world we live in now. And so if we just are missing something, like, oh, who knew? We totally need this one kind of lubricant we can't get anymore. And steam engine, locomotives don't work anymore. Whatever, it's going to be something like that. We can't.
Yeah, what is it? That random military group in the random straits called the Babel-Mendeb Strait can cause that much economic impact all the way up from Norway to South Africa to North America to Australia. These Houthis in the Babel-Mendeb Strait. That's the world. It's a very good point.
Well, the Houthis are just making it worse. The real problem is the closure of the Strait of Hormuz.
Yeah, so you have that, and then as well, when we just go over to the financial system for a second, because this is my area I study a lot. So we have a really weird system of money. It's called debt-based fiat money, and the way our fiat money system works is we loan it into existence, and the way it works smoothly is if we constantly have more debt coming into the system every year compared to the year before. And it's an absolutely unbroken line from 1971 to now, smooth as can be, except, oh no, there was this one little hiccup from 2008 through 2009 into the first quarter of 2010. Debt didn't grow. It kind of went backwards a tiny bit. It's okay. We paid down our credit cards, right? What's the problem? Almost broke the whole financial system. I mean, they were so scared by all of that.
Ponzi scheme. I said it's a Ponzi scheme. It only works as long as there's more money going into the system that's leaving. And in 2008, for the first time, there was some money leaving the system, and it almost broke everything.
In Wall Street, and we had these. Mervyn King was the exchequer, the president, of their Central Bank of England. He wrote his memoirs. He said, "Oh, we were hours away from complete systemic financial meltdown." Why? Because debt went backwards for a tiny bit. So we can't have that. So we have to have debts constantly growing. Well, debts constantly growing only happens if you're positive the future economy is going to be there to pay it back. If all of a sudden we're staring into this tunnel and it looks like future economy is going to be something horrendously lower, like 5% is like horrendous. 10% would be like nobody's experienced.
Yes. Look at our debt to GDP. What happens if our GDP goes down 40%? Our debt to GDP becomes completely 300, 400% debt to GDP. It'll be absolute disaster. Yeah, the United States can't. Any type of recession or major recession puts the United States in the debt spiral, where the interest charge on its debt starts to exceed its actual income revenue.
Experienced anything like that since the Great Depression. But all of a sudden our debt markets go, I'm not loaning money to a smaller future. And so the whole system of machinery of finance and debt-based money freezes up. And that's when things get really bad, because the machine seems to work either very, very well, kind of happily when it's expanding, but it really threatens to literally collapse if it starts going the wrong direction, which is down. So what we've done since then, anytime we get in a little trouble, the U.S. government becomes the borrower of last resort. So during COVID, you'd be surprised, did debt levels shrink because all these businesses went out of business and people couldn't pay this and that? Nope. The U.S. government stepped in and borrowed all of that. But we would be starting that, Mario, having come through, since COVID, we dialed our spending up enormously, 7% of GDP deficit during COVID. We never dialed it back. We're still at 6.8%. It's like emergency borrowing levels, although it hadn't been an emergency till now. Now this would be as an emergency, so the U.S. government would have to start borrowing vastly higher sums. And then all of a sudden, now we're talking Well, that's the final act for fiat currency, is when you blow out your money printing, because reasons. So it's important. But if we do that, that's where we see things really spiral out of control, financially, monetarily.
So this is where the hard assets would do much better as fiat currencies start to deflate
Gold.
very quickly. And then the system that has been functioning for so many decades, once it breaks, then we're kind of in no man's land. So, because what happens when the system breaks? Well, we haven't had the system fully break before. We had it on pause.
It's going to be the biggest financial crisis the world has ever seen, because there's never been a financial bubble like the financial system in the United States.
And almost break, but when it breaks, what does it do? Does it adapt? Do we replace it with a new system? What's that process like? Is that am I asking?
Well, there used to be a system that worked, a gold standard. There will be a big push to go back to something like that, or based around that, a modified version of that. Gold will be a much more important asset going forwards.
The right questions?
Yeah, absolutely. And the key, this is subtle, but it's really important, is that every one of these prior crises, like the great financial crisis, right? Oh, we had these collateralized debt obligations and, all these janky sort of tranched mortgage products and all this stuff. And it broke. But that was still just human engineering and cleverness, right? And so fundamentally, you could print your way out of that. And we did. That's what we did. We printed a lot of money to just cover all the holes in all the balance sheets. AIG, Goldman Sachs, everybody just printed money, gave it to them.
Fed's balance sheets more than doubled.
This is molecules. So this is different.
I think it quadrupled in size during the financial crisis or something.
Physics now. And so if we're missing those molecules, that's economic activity. You can't apply printing to cover up because it can't happen. I mean, it's just such a different dynamic. And my concern, I've been studying this for decades, but my concern is that I don't know of a single person I could have that conversation with in the current administration or even the prior one who would even know what I'm talking about, because they don't understand the connection between the physical world and the financial world. They don't get it. It hasn't been there their whole lives.
These are graphs I used to make during the financial crisis. I'm going to show you. So 900, so 2.5 times balance sheet grew of the Fed during the 2008 financial crisis. That's just money printing. Huge amount of money printing to get us out of 2008 financial crisis.
Or so they thought. So it's been ignorable. And because of that, we're like 2 generations deep into economic thinking that doesn't understand that the economy is a subset of the energy flows, not the other way around. They have it ass backwards.
So this time you cannot print your way out of it.
It's intentional, the fact that no one today knows how things really work, because anyone who knows how things really work looks at current financial system and our debt to GDP, etc., and is absolutely horrified. So, common sense isn't taught too much in the financial world and at universities.
Because as you said, you can't print molecules, you can't print oil, you can't print helium, you can't print natural gas. So once these molecules, these commodities start to go through their own crisis, then you really cannot do what we did in 2008 to delay the inevitable. Cannot be done anymore. So the music will eventually stop, like in that movie. What's that movie on the 2008 financial? No, the other one, the not funny one.
Margin Call?
Where the guy says, based on what you said, the music has stopped and I don't hear a peep. And I feel like this is where we're about to go, but there is no way out of it, because you can't, when it's debt, you could just print things. You can print things on screen to make the system work. You can fabricate things. You could, put things on, you put Band-Aid there, put Band-Aid there. But when it comes to oil and what makes the machine run, what makes those AI companies, the data centers operate, for AI companies to do well and carry the entire stock market with it and the entire economies with it. AI was even talked about as the solution for the massive national debt that multiple countries, including the US, face. Well, AI is going to increase productivity so those countries deal with the debt. Well, how's AI going to do that when the molecules...
Yeah, that's the fiction they're selling these days to anyone who says, oh my God, look at our national debt. How are we ever going to pay that back? AI, miracle, cure of AI.
Needed to allow AI to function at that scale are facing shortages. So these are foundational, foundations being broken here.
Yeah, I mean, it's such an important point. So what is an economy? Well, it's goods and services. Well, what are those? Okay, goods. Maybe I'm looking at a glass here, a computer. How did that computer come into existence? Oh, probably 10,000 separate supply chains, digging the sand out and turning it into silicon wafers to, the plastics or the covering, et cetera, and the wires and copper mining and all that. It's just like this, a computer alone, just huge amounts of activity, right? And every one of those pieces of activity, when you chase it down, has energy at the foundation of it, right? So copper is dug out of the ground with big giant machines and all that, right? So that's part one. Part two, even if I'm a service economy, I'm part of that side of things, it still takes energy to run a human, the food we eat, the houses we live in, et cetera, and so forth.
Cars we drive.
You take the molecules out, Mario, and you don't have that economic, it's not there. Like the copper wasn't dug out, Things, it didn't happen. And then you say, oh, but we're going to stimulate demand because, we can't have our economy shrink. So we'll give people money. That's what we did during COVID. Here's some stimmy checks. Go forth and spend, right? But if you put more spending against fewer things, you just get inflation, right?
Yep.
And so that's what's at risk here, is that the actual economy is going to shrink. It's going to skinny down. And so there's this other part. It's a little bit wonky, but our economy is complicated, but it's more than that. It's a complex system. So complicated systems could be a Boeing 777, right? You could say 3 million components. And if one of them goes bad, you can fault trace it all the way back and go forward again. It's very complicated, but you can trace everything from beginning to end, forward and back, and get to the same solution. It's not a mystery how the plane flies. It's not different every time you take it out, right? It's well functioning. But
if it ever does escalate to this point where the Middle East oil infrastructure is destroyed, Trump will go down in history as the worst president, and deservingly so, because he will have completely fucked up the world and caused tens of million people to die, not only from hunger but from financial destitution.
Complex system has interdependencies between different, what they're called agents, and because of that, you have emergent behaviors. And so our economy is complex, and it's actually a whole bunch of complex systems. And here's one of the things we know about complex systems: they owe their order and their complexity to the energy that flows through them. If you take the energy away, they get simpler, which is a euphemism for, we have 300,000 job classifications right now. Who knew, right? Some job classifications, like, what? That's a job? Somebody does that? If you took away 25% of our energy, I bet you we'd have 200,000 job classifications by the end of that, right? There'd be whole swaths of things that just wouldn't happen anymore because it doesn't make sense, right? Or it was a marginal activity, economically speaking, anyway. That's what's at risk here, is they're going to begin to break something that I think they understand, but they don't. Because you have to have this.
In our current modern world, there are things too complicated for any one human to understand. And for the moment, too complicated for any AI to understand either.
Humility to say it's a complex system. We should do everything we can in our power not to break the egg, because we can't put it back together again. And we should be very, very cautious about the idea that we think we know how this thing operates, because we actually don't. It's beyond human capability. And that's just the nature of complex systems. They have emergent behaviors, not predictable behaviors.
What can the average person do to not hedge? You can't hedge against a scenario that we're describing now, but
buy gold, physical gold,
to mitigate the impact it will have on their portfolio and on their life.
Well, this is my whole work in life. Is I don't want to just come up with distressing information. If somebody listens to me and they're not willing to take action, don't listen to me. It's not worth it. But if these dots I lay out are correct, then the answer to that is you want to build up buffers in your life, right? So I wouldn't have all my financial eggs in the stock portfolio basket, right? Because maybe I need to, parse those out a little bit, hedge a bit, right? Having gold and silver or real things at a time like this, having real stuff is important, because we all have all these people running their narrative, fantasy, delusional machine ideas, and that's the world they live in. Guaranteed they're going to try printing because it's worked in the past. They don't understand the importance of molecules. So you have to hedge against that. I can't control their printing. I can't control their ignorance, but I can make sure that I'm not entirely in the dollar basket if that's the country I live in, which I do. I have to have other stuff. So real estate, productive real estate, farmland, timberland, anything that has real, actual value, right? And so that's part one. Part two, everybody needs to consider the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Down there is the base stuff for your physical existence: food, shelter, safety, warmth, water. I have buffers against all of those things built into my life, and that's what I sort of coach people towards is, you know what, you should really build those buffers up. Not that we're going to be like that Idaho guy with beans in a bunker, going to make it all the way through to, last man standing. It's not like that. Whatever bottleneck we go through, we'll reorganize. The dust will settle. We'll pick ourselves back up. We might regret that we went down that path.
It'll be rough, but it won't be civilization collapse level. It will something like the collapse of Soviet Union for the people living there, except maybe a tiny bit worse. But Russia's doing great today.
But things will pick up again. So the point is to make sure that during that period of thinness, that you get through it as best you can, and not sort of be a victim of everything. So this really requires people taking a lot of responsibility for their own outcomes. And I think that it begins with exactly what you're doing, which is everybody needs context. You have to know what's going on in the world. Might be unpleasant, but you got to look right at it. And once you have enough of a frame of what you think is happening and what the risks are, you then work to mitigate those risks as best you can, because that's what you have to do in life.
Yep. I at least hope to see, when we're entering the final phases of this, see it coming ahead of time and move entirely into gold and make extreme steps to prepare at that point in time. We're nowhere near it yet.
So, but like everything you've just said right now, this is why I'm. These are the things that ease my worries, because I'm in my mind there's someone in Trump's administration telling him exactly what you're telling me, and Trump is listening to this like this, like, all right, we got to get the hell out of the Strait of Hormuz. We can't.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's telling him that in his bubble.
We can't afford this. I don't care what Netanyahu says. I don't care what Lindsey Graham said. I don't care what the military-industrial complex is saying. I don't want to end up in a world like you've just described. That's worse than Hoover. And maybe this is the mistake I'm making, is that there is nobody like that around Trump. And it goes back, I interviewed, I think I told you this, the person that wrote the movie Regime Change. And I haven't read the whole book, but I read excerpts from it. And that book goes into detail into how small Trump's bubble is, the echo chamber he's in. So maybe the biggest problem is no one's telling Trump exactly what you've just explained in this.
The Secretary of the Treasury, he's telling Trump this. There is one person. He is in deep state. He knows what's at stake. And he should have enough influence to prevent this worst case scenario. I'm hoping.
This discussion. And if that's the case, we're pretty screwed.
Well, again, if it's even Trump calling the shots, but let's assume it is. That's the sense I have, is that he has a very, very small bubble. And there was this, I think I was on the last show with you, and you showed that it was Fox News showing a picture of Trump in a room watching Fox News, right? Right? It was this Inception moment. Like,
one of my favorite photos in the world.
Yeah.
It's just Fox News showing Trump watching Fox News.
yes.
That's showing
Yes.
Trump.
So if he's getting his news from the same people, it's a little tiny. They have a very weird point of view. And I honestly, I don't watch Fox News at all anymore because I find it intolerable. They seem to push some very outdated ideas. I call it boomeritis. It just feels like people who have a vision of how the world used to be, desperately trying to make everything fit according to how it used to be. And it's a whole new world, baby. I mean, it's just like it's completely moved beyond that. I just feel like we've got a real dearth of good ideas. And my strong suspicion is, as you say, I think Trump is not getting good information, because I think good information is sometimes unpleasant information. And he has a very well-known track record of firing people who don't tell him what he wants.
Yeah. That said, I do believe Secretary of Treasury is warning Trump away from that red line of targeting energy infrastructure. Like, it just hasn't happened so far in the war. And I think there's a reason for that. Someone has explained to him that you hit oil infrastructure and, yeah, the world goes out of control. At least that, I'm optimistic that worst case scenario doesn't happen. It would have happened already, I think. Same with nukes. Anyway, this was a great video. It'll be on YouTube. Like and subscribe. Come watch on Kick or Twitch. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye.